What exactly is an illustrator, and how can you work toward becoming one, even if you've got a full-time job, a family, and a super busy schedule? If you've ever thought, I would love to be a professional artist, but I just don't have the time, then that is exactly what I'm talking about in this video and how I have tried to solve exactly that problem. Today I'm going to talk about my own experiences of learning what an illustrator is and developing my own strategy to become a professional illustrator while juggling a ton of other commitments. So, hope you enjoy. Now, as we're talking today, please bear in mind I'm not currently a professional illustrator and never have been one, but I've researched the topic quite heavily as this is the path that I'm pursuing. So I'm just relaying what I've found out from things I've researched and from my experience so far of trying to learn how to be a professional illustrator. And while I'm talking through these things today, we'll be looking at how I prepared for my first drawings for Inktober 2024, where I used the prompts backpack, discover, and boots all in the same drawing. Okay, so first things first, what is an illustrator? My personal working definition of an illustrator is an artist who uses their skills to tell visual stories. I think there's other definitions out there, but the focus of my pursuits are all on visual storytelling and, something that would involve doing something like children's books or comics or something along those lines. So very visual storytelling focused. So that's going to be the focus of my definition in this video. And I think that an illustrator has to have skills in three key areas, with the first two being the most important, but the third, I think, being inseparable. So the first two areas are your art skills, that's one, and visual storytelling, that's two. The third area that isn't fundamentally as important, but is kind of ends up being a non-negotiable, is having skills in business and marketing, and I'll talk about that later too. But as far as art skills go, what I mean is the areas of things like line quality, drawing basic shapes in 3 dimensions, understanding perspective and being able to create drawings in perspective, lighting and shading, color theory, figure drawing, character design, environment design, prop design, and tying it all together with composition. Now, when it comes to visual storytelling is really using all those art skills for the sake of communicating a story and moving a story forward. I think that's straightforward, and we see it all the time when we watch shows and movies and read comics or children's stories, but definitely a fundamental of illustration. The third key element or area I have is business and marketing, and I included that because in all the research that I've done, it seems to me like most illustrators work for themselves and do not work for big companies. I think you can, but it seems like most don't. Most are freelance artists, and if you're a freelance artist, then that means all of the marketing and management of your business and administration of your business and strategy of your business, all that is up to you. And so I think to a real degree, you could be the best artist in the world and not be good at marketing yourself and not have a successful business. So I think that's in some ways an unfortunate component of being an artist, a freelance artist, but I think that's just a reality. And I personally think that stuff, there's aspects of that stuff that can be exciting, and I think it forces you to, from my understanding, again, I'm not currently a professional artist in any capacity, but it seems like it can be helpful to have to focus on those things because it really requires that you focus in on what your audience likes, and knowing what not just seems like good art to you or enjoyable art to from your perspective, but what people are willing to pay for. And so I think that can be good. And if you're wondering how illustrators make money, from what I've learned, I think it could be a whole video on its own. I think there's a lot of ways that illustrators make money, but I think most fundamentally an illustrator makes money because they consistently make art into visual stories that people want to pay money for. Like, if you're not doing that as an artist, then you're not going to be making money as an illustrator. You have to be able to do that first and foremost, and then kind of all the other channels, all the channels of making money are potentially available to you. As a reminder, if you're finding this video helpful and like content like this, please remember to give it a like and subscribe for more content like it. Thanks. Okay, so you might be thinking all that stuff about what an illustrator is and does sounds pretty awesome, but how in the world does a person do that if they've got a full-time job, a ton of other commitments and responsibilities, maybe a family with small kids? And so I'm going to talk through what my strategy has been to do exactly that. And I have broken down my strategy into another 3 things. And most fundamentally, I think it is, you got to learn the stuff. 2, you got to practice the stuff. And 3, you got to make the stuff until people want to pay you for it. I'll explain all that. So for the first one, learn the stuff. There's so many resources out now that I think it can be really overwhelming. And for one, there's so many free resources and really excellent free resources out there that I think it's really compelling to never spend any money on something that you're only going to be able to give part-time to, or some of your time to. But I have found that it's really helpful to not kind of try and drink from a fire hose every single time you're trying to learn a new component of art skills that you don't have, going back to that list of figure drawing and drawing basic shapes in 3 dimensions and lighting and shading and all those things. I have found that it's really helpful to just identify a very small handful of resources and mostly stick to those. And the more those resources can walk you through all of those things, then I think the better. And I personally learn a lot better through video and audio things I can watch and listen to. And so I really like online video type stuff. And I personally have found the School of Visual Storytelling very I've just kind of decided that's my resource, because it covers all those areas, and it covers them in a progression, and it even talks about the business of being an illustrator and marketing yourself, and there's just a ton of good resources. I'm not in any way sponsored by the School of Visual Storytelling, but it's a resource that has been really helpful to me. I know that there are others. I know that there are, I think, a ton of online learning sites that have curriculum, and I don't know if they're all organized as straightforwardly as the School of Visual Storytelling, but I know Domestika is one. I know Skillshare has a lot of skills. Probably all. I haven't thoroughly looked at Skillshare, but I know that they have courses on kind of the fundamentals of illustration. So I know that there's a lot out there. I think picking a small number of reliable resources and just primarily using them, as you get started has been the most helpful for me. So that's learn the stuff, find resources that are going to teach you the stuff. And I think all of these, learn the stuff, practice the stuff, make the stuff until people want to pay you for it, they all require that you carve out some time for learning and doing. And I'll just say, almost as a spoiler alert, that if you are able to carve out and protect that time for learning and doing art, that's the most important thing in my mind. If you're not doing that, that's the most important thing that you can do, especially if you can keep it sustainable and enjoyable over time. Like that's the magic in my mind, because then you have a pipeline for creating artwork. And as long as you're consistent about it and you can keep it, like I said, sustainable and enjoyable, then you're going to be able to improve if you need to improve. You're going to be able to churn out artwork. If the only thing you need is just to churn out artwork, you'll have that carved out in your schedule. And it might not be anything close to the amount of time that you want, but a small amount of time is way better than no time. And I won't talk anymore about that, because most of the rest of the content on my channel is about just the value of even putting a small amount every day. So, talked about learning the stuff. 2, practicing the stuff. Really, that's just like having that time every day and practicing what you're learning. And doing that consistently, I think, is the biggest thing. Small amount over a long period of time is way better than large amounts really inconsistently. And then 3, as you're practicing this stuff, I think you will naturally gravitate towards trying to make better and better pieces. And I think you just keep on doing that until you either have something that you think would satisfy a portfolio, and that can take some research, but I think that's one route. You can also make stuff until you start getting offers from people to pay you for your work. I think if you have social media accounts and people start saying, hey, could you draw a picture of whatever for me, that's a good sign. And I know of artists who have, I don't know if it's agents, but they have had people reach out to them and say, hey, we would love for you to work on a book for us, just through viewing their Instagram. So I think making stuff and putting it out there, I guess I would add to that. And on that note, if you can find challenges where especially experts are willing to give you feedback, or just people who are currently professional artists are willing to give you feedback, or and that, I think that can be paid or free. The school, again, I'm not sponsored by the School of Visual Storytelling, but they just have a lot of resources, and they do a challenge every month that is free to participate in, and they will pick a handful of drawings that are submitted for that every month, and give a bunch of feedback. And so it's not necessarily a given that your work will be selected, but if it is, then you have professionals looking at your stuff, telling you where to improve. And I think that I've seen at least a number of different artists have like Patreons where they have feedback opportunities like that built into their Patreon subscriptions and things like that. But I think that stuff is, I've actually not done it, but I've planned to for multiple months, and I hope to in November do the School of Visual Storytelling's one. But I think that stuff is probably gold if you can get feedback from people who are currently doing what you want to do. And to come full circle on the how do you do all this stuff as a busy person thing, I think I don't think it was like super clear up front, and that was not on purpose. But I think it really does boil down to carving out a reliable amount of time, and it can be. I think it could be as small as like 15 minutes, but I think the smaller the amount of time, the more easy it is to get frustrated with how small the amount of time is. But I do think even 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and less can be over time very, very impactful for the goals of trying to learn and practice and make art. And And I think if you do that if you spend 15 minutes every day for a year, then that's, I don't know how many hours. I can't do that math very quickly in my head, but that's way more hours than you would have had if you decided that you just don't have the time. So I think you can fit that learning, practicing, and creating into very small slots. And then maybe you negotiate, with time off, then, you take a vacation and you get to indulge in, multiple hours a day for a week or something like that. And, you could negotiate things like that. In the end, I certainly think that there's a ton to learn if you're starting from scratch and want to be an illustrator. I think it is doable, and I think that when you don't have a lot of commitments, then it's just kind of a question of how quickly do you want to do it? Do you want to try and do it and, commit 60 hours a week to getting to where you need to be within 1 year or something like that? And I'm not saying I know that that's possible, but when you have a ton of other commitments, it's literally not possible to dedicate anything like that amount of time to it. So you don't have those options. So, but you can be, I think when you're busy, it forces you to be a lot more intentional with your time. So I think you can end up having potentially higher quality time, even though it's less, certainly higher quality time, compared to the amount of time you actually have, the higher quality time for the amount of time that you actually have. But please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear how other people strategize learning these skills, amidst a busy schedule. And even if you're not hugely busy, but, focusing on these things isn't your primary focus. I would just love to hear people's strategies for learning these things and, what's been helpful, what's been hard. Those things are really, really helpful for me. So I would love to hear from you. I hope that you've enjoyed this and it's been helpful. If you are interested in my progress throughout this year or other things I've learned along this year-long journey that I'm midway through right now or partway through, please click on one of the videos on the screen. But thanks for watching.